Your beliefs do not shape reality. Reality shapes your beliefs. I know that a lot of New Age spiritual teachings revolve around the idea that your beliefs shape reality, and that you can choose your beliefs. But this is false. And I believe there is something sinister behind the spread of this idea. And I'll get to that. But first, I have to lay some groundwork. You can't choose to believe something or not to believe something. But even if you could, your belief or disbelief in no way alters reality. Try to believe that you can fly. You can imagine what it would be like if you could fly, but you know you can't do it. You could lie and say that you can, but you know that you can't. You could pretend to believe it, but you would only be pretending. Your experience of reality consistently affirms the fact that you can't fly. There isn't a single time in your life that you've ever tried to fly and succeeded. If you ever have tried, you've failed. And every failure serves as evidence of your inability to fly. You've never seen another human being fly, not even once. And so your beliefs are shaped by your experience, by your observations, and by evidence. And of course, if someone did actually believe that they could fly, we would say that they're crazy. If they showed us that they actually could fly, we would be amazed. But unless they actually can fly, in reality, then they're crazy. Their beliefs are either congruent with reality, or they're not. But reality isn't affected by their delusional beliefs. So even if it were possible to choose to believe that you could fly, how useful or beneficial would it be to choose to believe something that is incongruent with reality? Would it help you in any way? Or would it just cause you to do things that are irrational and dangerous, such as jumping off of rooftops? With this example, it seems very clear that your beliefs don't create reality, and that you can't choose to believe something that directly contradicts the evidence you're presented with, or that conflicts with your direct experience. But someone might object that it isn't always so simple. What about religion? Someone might ask. And religion is an interesting case. Let's consider the New Thought movement first, since it's usually members of this religion, or some other New Age religion like it, who claim that beliefs create reality. What will they say if I ask them, if my beliefs create reality, and I have the belief that my beliefs don't create reality, does this mean that my beliefs don't create reality? If they say that your beliefs create reality, whether you believe they do or not, then this seems like a blatant contradiction. But if they say that my belief that my beliefs don't create reality creates a reality that isn't created by my beliefs, then that leads us into a paradox as well. And so logic forces us to reject the claim that our beliefs create reality. But what about other religions like Christianity? Well, even a Christian doesn't say that Christianity is true because they believe it is. They will say that they believe it because it's true. And they'll tell you that if you don't believe that Christianity is true, then you'll go to hell when you die, whether you believe in hell or not. So with Christians, unless they've blended the Christian religion with New Thought, we're dealing with realists. They believe that reality exists, and your beliefs are either true or false, depending on whether or not they are congruent with reality. And so I agree with Christians as far as that goes. Someone might ask, well, what about your claim that a person can't choose to believe something that contradicts evidence, experience, and reason? Don't Christians choose to believe in Christianity even though it contradicts evidence, experience, and reason? I can say a few things in response to this. First of all, I do believe that Christianity is contradicted by evidence, experience, and reason. But as far as reason goes, there seems to be a negative correlation between religious belief and IQ. You can easily look this up for yourself with a quick internet search. People with a lower IQ are less likely to notice the logical contradictions that may appear glaringly obvious to people with a higher IQ. As far as evidence or experience, many religious claims are more or less unfalsifiable. Even if there isn't any evidence that heaven does exist, it's difficult to try to offer evidence that heaven doesn't exist. And of course, every now and then, someone will claim that they died on the operating table and got a glimpse of heaven, but God sent them back, or something like that. And stories like this tend to get circulated in churches. The person claiming to have had this experience will often be invited to speak in churches. Of course, we can't verify whether or not they're telling the truth. And even if they are truthfully describing an experience that they had, which they genuinely believe to have been real, there are other more rational and scientific explanations than that they actually went to heaven. But many people, especially those with a lower IQ, are likely to accept such testimony as evidence. And then there's prayer. Religious people may pray for a lot of things, and so there's obviously a high probability that at least some of the things they pray for will happen. If they pray for a sick family member to get better, and then the person does eventually get better, they tend to accept this as evidence that prayer works, and that therefore God exists and the Bible is true. Of course, all the prayers that aren't answered are ignored or explained away. It isn't that God didn't answer their prayers, it's just that his answer was no. And so a religious person doesn't simply choose to believe whatever they want. Their beliefs are shaped by evidence, experience, and reason. But the evidence is filtered, the experiences are interpreted, and the reasoning is convoluted. If you've ever had the joy of hearing a Christian apologist, offer a rational and evidence-based defense of the faith, then you know what I mean. And I'm of the opinion that at least a significant number of Christian apologists don't actually believe what they're saying. They may be in it for the money or for some other reason. Maybe it isn't about the money. Maybe they see it as a kind of noble lie. They think that it's necessary to convince the masses to believe in religion so that they'll behave morally. It's not possible to know a person's inner motives, though. But my point is that among the congregation, among the sheep, they don't simply choose to believe in the religion. In order to avoid cognitive dissonance, they require rational justifications for their beliefs. I would argue that those justifications are not rational at all, and that they're invalid. But unfortunately, many people are convinced by the kinds of arguments that apologists offer, especially if they want to believe it for emotional reasons, such as a desire to see their loved ones who have passed on in the afterlife, or a need to feel some sense of hope that there's a good God who has a plan for their lives and who is working everything together for their good. But especially for people who have higher IQs, it's pretty difficult to escape from the cognitive dissonance. It's extremely common for religious people to have a crisis of faith. How many people have a crisis of faith that the sun will rise tomorrow? Why is our faith in gravity or the sunrise so much stronger? Because these things are realities, and our beliefs are shaped by reality. As a rule of thumb, the harder you have to try to believe in something, the less likely it is to be true. If you're constantly struggling with doubts, maybe you should stop struggling. Those doubts arise because whether you're conscious of it or not, you're noticing contradictions between your beliefs and reality. In another video entitled, "What is Enlightenment?", I defined enlightenment as the direct experience of reality as it is. When I say that, I don't mean that enlightenment is the indirect experience of reality as it's presented to you through sense perception. That would be naive realism. I've criticized that in several videos. Naive realism is not enlightenment. Reality is known directly through reason. But this doesn't mean that enlightenment is an intellectual understanding of reality, or that enlightenment is a mental conceptualization of reality as a mind-independent entity. I've criticized that too in several videos. I would compare enlightenment to knowing math. But I'm not saying that having an advanced knowledge of mathematics is the same as being enlightened, or that advanced mathematical knowledge is necessary to become enlightened, although a person who struggles with arithmetic and geometry is unlikely to become enlightened. This is just like saying that not all soil is fertile. You may plant seeds, but that doesn't mean they'll grow. And I do believe that a certain minimum IQ is a necessary but not sufficient condition for a person to become enlightened. If a person has at least a certain minimal IQ, then it's possible. But it's necessary for them to do a couple of things. First, they must train themselves in logic and the art of reasoning. Obviously, mathematics is a useful tool in training the mind to think logically. Second, they must train themselves to observe everything objectively. I think introverts have an advantage over extroverts. Thinking types have an advantage over feeling types. Intuitives have an advantage over sensing types. And perceivers have an advantage over judging types. But I think anyone with a sufficient IQ, who devotes him or herself to the practice of detached observation and to the study of philosophy, can become enlightened. I should add to this the necessity of either strengthening or subduing the will, depending on how you look at it. It may be better to think of this in terms of discovering the true will. It's only the false will that must be subdued, just as it's only the false self that must be shattered. And the two are related, because to know the true self is to know the true will. An Illuminatus does whatever he wants. He acts spontaneously and without thought. This is not the same as the ignoramus who does whatever he wants and acts without thinking, though. The ignoramus doesn't act according to his true will. He acts according to carnal or emotional impulses. He doesn't act spontaneously. Something else acts spontaneously through him. Think of a soldier who obeys orders without hesitation. It isn't really him who is acting. He's being directed by something outside of himself. But of course, this is a simplistic characterization. We can also think of another soldier as representing the Illuminatus. Think of the archetypal samurai warrior going into battle with no thought of victory or defeat. He is fully present. He fights spontaneously, with no thought or hesitation. There's no time to make mental representations of reality and then mentally formulate a response. The intensity of the battle, of the moment, forces him to perceive reality directly, and his actions are a part of the reality itself, rather than a response to a representation of reality. He may describe the experience as if he wasn't the one doing it. It happened on its own through him. What is it, you might ask? Well, that's what they don't want you to know. They don't want you to know what it is. So who are they, you might ask? Well, they're the ones who don't want you to know what it is. If you find out what it is, you'll know who they are. You may think I'm just being funny, but I'm not. I have a very serious point to make. As I've said, knowing what it is requires at least a certain IQ. So they want to lower the average IQ of the population. The great thing about democracy, from their perspective, is that rule by the majority is really rule by the average. The majority is the middle of the bell curve. In a democratic system, as long as they can deceive the majority, they can rule over everyone in the name of the majority. And the lower the average IQ is, the easier it is to deceive the majority. When you understand this, it suddenly makes sense why they want mass migration from countries that have a lower average IQ into countries that have a higher average IQ. They want to lower the average IQ of the higher IQ countries. I also said that knowing what it is requires the cultivation of reason and logic. So if they don't want you to know what it is, as I claim, then surely they would be enemies of reason and logic. So you might expect them to promote relativism and the idea that all opinions are equally valid, except for the opinion that not all opinions are equally valid, of course. That opinion is definitely not allowed. 2 plus 2 equals anything you believe it does, anything but 4. Absolute truth is anathema to tyranny. I also said that knowing what it is requires practicing detached observation. It requires objectivity. If they don't want you to know what it is, then they definitely don't want objectivity. First, they'll attack the notion of objectivity and make everything out to be subjective. Next, they'll get you to filter everything through their subjective lens. Nothing is absolutely correct or incorrect. All that matters is what is politically correct. And of course, they will decide what is and isn't politically correct. Finally, they want to replace your true will with the general will. Abstractions such as society and the common good replace the true self. Dare to know thyself. Dare to know it for yourself. Discover your true will. Practice detached observation. Cultivate reason. Don't give in to them. I'll leave it at that for now. Be sure to hit the like button. Subscribe. I'll leave it at that for now. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this. And take a look at some of my other videos. Visit my website at illuminatuspythagoras.com. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Peace.